Hi, Justin. Great that you took time to have this interview, and I'm very happy that you are here and that you will discuss some of your research today.
Thanks, Walter. Thanks for the invitation.
So I'm very fond of your work, and I think it's fascinating that you take a broader view on the research of Reiki.
Thanks so much.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I started doing kind of participant observation research on a variety of different energy healing practices around 2001, 2002,
Mhm.
when I was just post undergraduate, and I had started doing this research. It was a funded kind of postgraduate research year by the
Mhm.
Watson Fellowship. I was looking at not just Reiki, but also Kundalini yoga, Qigong healing, different Japanese new religious movements, including Jo-Rei and Mahikari.
Yeah.
And then I continued practicing Reiki and some other forms of healing myself for a while, and just kind of wondered what if I kept going with this. There's not really a lot written, particularly about Reiki. I mean, there was some academic literature in the sociology of spirituality and in the study of kind of the New Age and kind of American religious history, and also in Europe as well, that talked about Reiki, but there was no real study on Reiki. There was no academic monograph on Reiki, and so in my master's program and then my PhD program, I was really trying to work to uncover some of that history that really had not been adequately told. And I think, still, with my cohort, with myself and Yoyan Yonker, who you've interviewed, and Robert Fuston, who, even though he wasn't doing his Reiki research for an academic degree, has training in library science and also as a Chinese medical expert. And I think,
Yeah.
his,
Yeah.
his perspective is really interesting as well. Dory Beeler, not looking at the history, but the anthropology of Reiki. Hirano Naoko in Japan, who is hopefully finishing up her dissertation right now, that all of us kind of were trying to fill in some of these gaps in the literature that recognized Reiki was important, but I think hadn't sufficiently plumbed the depths of what is out there. And now that we have this kind of foundation of research, I mean, I think it's time for the next generation to start filling in some of the gaps. But at the same time, there are things that we may never know, right? There's a lot in terms of particularly of Reiki's early history, where there's just kind of a lack of sources. I did my best to try to catalog some of the early students of Takata. A number of the people I interviewed for my dissertation work have made their transition, in the last, since I talked to them.
Yeah.
And yeah, the amount that we know, on some hand, some new materials have been uncovered. I'm really looking forward to Olaf Bohm's book. He has a bunch of materials from the Usui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai from the 1920s and 1930s
Oh, really?
that
Wow.
no one's really had access to before. But on the other hand, there's certain resources that are passing away as the elders move on to the next realm, and we lose access to their interviews, except for maybe through channeling or
Yeah.
types of
Yeah, that's right. What's his name? Olaf?
boom,
Olaf Bohm.
b b-o umlaut h-m,
Bohm. Olaf Bohm. Okay,
boom.
never heard about him.
Okay, yeah, he's a Gendai Komyo guy,
Ah, I see, I
and
see.
yeah, he has some stuff online that but it's not, his research has not really yet been published, and I'm pushing him. I can't wait for the book. It's going to be really important. So he's shown me some of the materials, but he asked me, please don't write about this yet until I get. And of course,
Yeah, I've come to research Reiki since I was into first degree because I always was fascinated by that subject, and at that time there was not much available about true history of
oh
Reiki. I
yeah,
think you really made new standards. by doing in-depth research, like getting your hands on documents from Hawaii, these news, these magazines where also something was written about Takada. How did you get this idea to wrap that?
You know, that's a good question. It was collaboration with Hirano, who I mentioned
Ah,
before, who's doing her PhD at Waseda University. She and I started interviews. So we met, I think, in January 2012, and she had already been to Hawaii one time
hmm.
and networked with this professor at the University of Hawaii Hilo named I'm afraid I'm good. I think it's Masafumi Honda. I'm afraid I may have messed up his given name, but it's definitely Honda Sensei. I think it's Masafumi. He runs what's called the Hawaii Japan Center in Hilo,
Hmm.
and she had reached out to him about whether there were Nisei, whether there were second generation Japanese Americans living in Hilo who had practiced Reiki, and there were, and he knew some of them. And so she asked me, would I want to go to Big Island with her and interview some of these elders? Her English isn't so good, and their Japanese maybe isn't so good. So together we did these interviews, and I think it was around that time that we started wondering what was available in Japanese language press at that time. So there were a number of
Yeah.
different Japanese language newspapers in Hawaii in the pre-war period, and I think it was then that we started thinking about that. And unfortunately, in Hawaii, they only exist on microfilm. And I don't know if you've ever done historical work on microfilm,
Yeah.
but it's very difficult on the eyes, and particularly my Japanese reading. If I have a text and I can sit with it with a dictionary, and I can work through a text, but to scan through microfilm looking for a particular word, looking for it's very time consuming even in
Yeah.
English, let
Yeah.
alone Japanese. So we agreed that she would do a return trip to go through. Particularly, we had the rough dates of Hayashi Sensei's visit to Japan, and then she would go through and start looking for that. So she was really did the legwork on that, and then once she found this in the University of Hawaii at Manoa library,
Hmm.
where I had done my master's work, and so I was able to
Ah,
get her some affiliation there and some resources and access and all this stuff. Then she found out that there was a library in Japan that actually had better versions of all of the newspapers from that time. And then she
wow.
was able to get higher quality prints. And then also, I'm sure you've probably seen the book by Masaki Nishina. And he's a student of Jikiden Reiki. He's a student of Tadao Yamaguchi. He has a very good website that I'm grateful for, where he was able to find a few articles that we didn't find. So, I mean, it's been a very collaborative effort, I want to say.
Great.
And
Great. I
and
love it.
then also, and then in, so then I also worked with the Takata Archive Project.
Hmm.
Phyllis Furumoto had heard about my work, I think through Yoyan introduced us originally.
Hmm.
And it was just good timing in a way. I had wanted to reach out to her for years
Hmm.
and had been kind of intimidated to. And Yoyan, as a Dutchman, doesn't know the restraint, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you want to meet Phyllis? I'm writing an email to introduce you." And he didn't ask me permission. He didn't ask me, "Do you want to meet Phyllis?" He said, "No, no, you have to talk to Phyllis." So he wrote this introduction email, and it was in this time where Phyllis's own mother, Alice Takata Furumoto, was in her kind of final years, in the end of her life, and Phyllis, I think, was at this point where she wanted to deal with these materials
Hmm.
that she knew they were very important, but she never knew how to properly deal with them.
Yeah.
And the fact that Yoyan introduced me at this time when Phyllis was starting to come to terms with, I have this historical legacy. Of course, she also had her own cancer, which had metastases in this at around this time as well. So there was a lot of different factors
Yeah.
where finally she said, okay, I have these boxes of historical materials from my grandmother. Something needs to be done with them. And all of a sudden, she was introduced to this guy doing historical research, talking to his grandmother's early students in Hawaii, looking at Japanese language materials from Hawaii. And she thought, okay, this is a guy who could actually figure out what to do with this stuff.
Yeah.
And so working with Phyllis and Joyce, Paul and Susan Mitchell, and Robert Fuston, we went through these boxes, cataloged everything that we had, digitized stuff, figured out things. You know, the fact that I could read the Japanese, I could actually figure. She had paid for Japanese language translations in the early 90s of a lot of this material, and then she basically sat on most of it.
Mm-hmm.
But she had also in those holdings certain materials that weren't that no one else had yet, and some of those are very interesting as well. So yeah, it's really been a whole collaborative effort putting all this stuff together. It took many years, and hopefully there's still some stuff to be turned up. But yeah, this is where we're at.
Yeah, that's great. I love these kind of networking things, and I think there are so much open question because I think, for example, uh, Chujiro Hayashi was teaching Takada a lot of things which did not show up in the Furumoto generation of masters, at least not as far as I know. Like we would know what?
Like what, for example?
Oh, like the Japanese Reiki methods, these kind of these clearing methods and breathing and so on. Um,
We don't know. Actually, is that? I mean, the Yamaguchi lineage,
they have it.
they have it, and the Komyo lineage, they
It
have.
is also in
They
the books of
they
Hayashi and
do.
Usui.
Okay, but in terms of the dry bathing, the
Mhm.
kenyoku, and
Breathing exercise and many other things.
breathing exercise, Takata did teach.
Ah, okay.
Um, that John Harvey Gray's lineage has that. But you're right that I think in Usui Shiki Ryoho,
Nothing.
the breathing technique, and also I think what Takata called the Reiki Blessing,
Yeah.
which is Reiju.
Mhm.
She also taught, but yeah, I agree that that Usui Shiki Ryoho over time de-emphasized certain practices that Takata learned from Hayashi and taught to her students, but that there was kind of I mean, you also have to recognize that in the 1980s, I think there was a real challenge.
Mhm.
Phyllis's training, to be respectful, under Takata, even though she had practiced Reiki maybe since she was a very a child really. Um, in terms of her training to be a master, she spent some time apprenticing. She traveled with her, she taught with her, but she was really asked to be her successor with in the last year of Takata's life.
Mhm.
She had about 18 months of apprenticeship, and then to be the successor, less than a year.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Takata, I think, didn't expect. She was a very psychic woman. She had a lot of premonitions. She had a lot of visions. I think she did not expect to make her transition when she did.
Mhm. Mhm.
She told Phyllis, right? Phyllis was wanted to come or visited her. She came to visit her in the hospital outside or in Seattle or outside of Seattle in early December 1980 when she had her heart attack. And Takata said, "What are you doing here? You have to go teach." She said, "I'll see you in Iowa for Christmas." And then she didn't make it to
Yeah.
Christmas. So I
Yeah.
think if things had gone a little differently, and
Mhm.
if there had been more time for Phyllis to get, I think, more detailed instruction, more direct instruction on what to do with the lineage, I think things would have gone very differently, obviously. And I think that it was a difficult situation in the 1980s for
Mhm.
her to, and for the community to reconcile what does it mean to be a grandmaster? What does Usui Shiki Ryoho actually consist of, right? There was this process of systematization that was continued from Takata. Takata did her own systematization, right,
Mhm.
from what she learned from Hayashi. And they had to make certain decisions. You know, the development of the aspects and the elements, the choice to de-emphasize certain practices, to standardize the foundation treatment. I think more than Takata really had. You know, their choices were made for sure,
Mhm.
but I think that you also have to take into perspective the difficulty of the situation they were in,
Mhm.
of inheriting this legacy, of
Yeah.
being wholly responsible for it, right? Of having no real contact with the history, with the Japanese lineages. It's easy to look back from our perspective now and be critical, but I think to really sympathize with the situation in the 1980s and the 1990s,
Mhm.
I think gives a really different perspective on those choices.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I've also heard that there was a master teaching on Hawaii Island, which made the first 2 degrees with Takada and then got the third degree from Hayashi, but he never trained master students.
Yeah, so actually it's interesting you ask about him. I've actually just been in touch again with his son, because some other people were asking about it. And so I got back in touch with him and he shared some more stuff with me. And then he asked his family on the Big Island, and they found in the family Butsudan the certificates. So now we have a much more full picture of that story.
Oh,
And I could tell a little bit if
yes,
you're
please,
interested.
please.
So this man's name was Tatsuji Nagao.
Hmm.
He, if I knew we were going to talk about him, I would have looked a little bit more, reviewed my notes on his life story. But he was a first generation migrant to Hawaii Island. He had originally been sent, I believe, by his parents. I think he's from Hiroshima Prefecture, and he had been sent by his parents to bring back. Forget if it was his brother or his uncle who had gone to Hawaii to work and was, I think, getting into trouble there. And so he was sent to bring him home. And then he ended up staying, and he made some money. He was a tinsmith, and so he made metal implements. Even while he was working on the plantations, he made metal implements, bento boxes and lanterns and things like that for his coworkers. And so he made some money, and he invested it in land, and he started farming his own sugarcane.
Hmm.
And he had a big family. I think there were maybe 10 or 11 kids.
Oh, wow.
And he learned Reiki. So we have the photo of his Shoden class, his first degree class with Takata in December 1938, in what I believe was her first class she taught on the Big Island,
Wow.
which was at a Japanese Buddhist temple outside of Hilo, actually near where she would end up moving a couple of years later, and in Kurdistan, so just kind of south of Hilo. And what appears to be, so I wasn't really sure about this history when I wrote my dissertation. It'll be updated for the book, but it's a lot clearer now with the certificates that we found, or that they found, the family found. But it seems like he took his shoden with Takata
Hmm.
in 38, and then after the war in 49, his eldest son, I want to say, one of his sons he had worked for military intelligence services during the war, which was a common thing for Japanese American
Hmm.
army who could, if they were bilingual, or they could help translate Japanese communications and things like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
interrogate prisoners of war, things like that. And so he had worked for military intelligence services in the Pacific during the war, and then he worked for the American occupation of Japan after the war.
Yeah.
And so in 49, they went to visit him in Tokyo,
Hmm.
and he knew, so Hayashi Chujiro was dead,
Yeah.
but Hayashi Chie
Hmm.
was the head of the Kenkyukai at that
Yeah.
time. And he knew that she was there, I guess, through Takata, right, who he had studied with. And somehow the son was able to get in touch with her and arranged for the father to meet her. And so the father, the wife, and their youngest son, who had come to Hawaii, who had come to Japan with them, who was, I want to say 11 at the time, maybe 10 years old at the time.
Hmm.
He was born in 38, so I think he was 11 at the time.
Hmm.
went to the Kenkyukai with the oldest son. So the four of them met Hayashi Chie, and she was like, wow, you're a student of Takata. She knew Takata, of course. She and Takata had a correspondence. Takata had lived with them. So there was this connection there. And apparently, so she gave the Shodan initiation to the son, the wife, I believe, and the two sons and the wife, I believe. And she was giving him Okuden, the second degree.
Yeah.
And but apparently, when she was giving him Okuden, she felt his hands, and she said, you're really powerful Reiki. You have powerful Reiki, as they say in Hawaii.
Hmm.
And so she wanted to give him more.
Hmm.
And what originally what the daughter had told me, and the son and the daughter told me, was that their father learned how to do the initiations. So I figured this was Shimpiden, that he was a master, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the actual certificate, which we just got, like a month ago,
Wow.
from 1949, it's not a Shimpiden certificate the way that Takata's looks. It's a certificate that says that she gave him the Kokiho, the breath technique, and the Reiju, the means of giving Reiju. But it doesn't say anywhere on it Shimpiden. And it may be a kind of what Jikiden calls, what is it, Shihankaku?
Yankaku, see, we.
Yeah, the first level of being a master. It's not like a full master yet,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe you can initiate other people to Shoden. You can initiate
Right.
other people to first
First,
degree.
right.
And it seems like that's what he received
Okay.
when he was there. And like you said, he never taught commercially. He initiated members of his family. He initiated his grandchildren. And that's all. And this family, it's very interesting. He believed Reiki was more of a folk healing practice. He was very critical of Takata for having a commercial practice.
Hmm.
And he healed people. There's lots of miracle stories of his healing, and people really have these transformative experiences with his practice. But he never charged a set fee. People gave him gifts out of their gratitude, and he believed that was the proper model. He was critical of Takata for having a clinic, for charging set fees, for only treating people for 1 hour. He said 1 hour, you're just getting started at 1 hour. What do you 1 hour and she's done. So these are stories that I heard from their family about how, he was critical of his own teacher for what he saw. This is in 1940, 1941, the 1940s. People were already complaining, Reiki, it used to be better. Now it's, great. This degeneration narrative, it's a perennial thing. You look at Buddhism, in 1,000 years ago, people were complaining this isn't what the old time Buddhism used to be. It's
Yeah.
there's always people who complain about the
Yeah. Yeah.
degeneration in every generation. So anyway, there's a long-winded story, but
Oh,
it's a very interesting example of these kinds of other lineages, maybe you might say, that never really that kind of died out really in
I
the
see.
story of Reiki. And although I kind of argue in my dissertation, it's a bit different, but I think that the way Takata taught in different communities, right? She taught in the Bay Area, she taught in Chicago, she taught in BC. Those are some of the biggest areas. Other places too, but those were kind of the major places she taught in North America. And I think the BC community, which was a lot of kind of hippies and people, alternative types, people living off the grid, people back to the land, agricultural. I think that community was a lot closer in some ways to the kind of people who were learning Reiki on the Big Island in the
Yeah.
1930s
Yeah.
and 40s, where it was done in their community. There was not a lot of commercialization of it. People were, encouraged to learn and then practice within the community, the Reiki
Yeah.
circles. Treatments were done sometimes for barter.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, it's maybe closer to the what was in the Big Island. But also, you got to remember, that's not what was like in Japan.
No, no.
In Japan, right? Usui was criticized in his time for charging too much money for membership of the Gakkai. That's why Eguchi, right, started the Tenohira Ryoji, which, the palm healing. Eguchi Toshihiro, one of Usui's students, the reason he started it, he says, was because Usui charged too much money. It was only for the super elite upper class people, and he thought, this is so miraculous, we got to spread it to more people. And it's funny to see, these conflicts from the 1920s get recapitulated in the 1990s or what have you, right? Or 1980s, 1990s. William Lee Rand and others, saying $10,000 for a master. No, it doesn't make any sense. So
history repeats itself. Yeah.
I think that some of those ways where Takata was criticized for being too materialistic, the $10,000 for the master, I think that actually was preserving some of the stuff she had been taught.
Yeah.
Hayashi, the story goes, she said she had to sell her house to become a Reiki master. That might be true. She owned a home in Kauai that she, her late husband, she inherited from him. And after she became a master, she didn't really live there anymore. She moved to Honolulu. It's not really entirely clear. I don't have the smoking gun, but I think she may have actually sold her house to become a Reiki master.
I think that was the way at that time,
Yeah. So some of that, even if, and this is something that'll be cleared up in Olaf's book, but in terms of, did the Gakkai charge for treatments? Did Hayashi charge for treatments? That we don't have evidence that's in the public sphere yet that says one way or another on that. But certainly to learn Reiki was a very expensive endeavor. And so while her narrative about like the exchange of energies and Usui in the beggar camp, the famous story of Usui in the beggar camp, it seems that she developed this as a way of explaining things that she had learned, even though she developed those narratives maybe on her own. These were things that she learned, that Reiki should not be given away for free, that there are maybe spiritual teachings around money and around, investment in one's own healing process and one's own education. So, I mean, yeah, this is something that's a little bit unclear, and I'm hoping it's going to clear up a little bit more, is the relationship between money and Reiki in 1920s, 1930s Japan. But it does seem that is something that she did inherit from Japan. And maybe when her students in Hawaii were pushing back against it, it was in the spirit of Eguchi, who in Japan in the 1920s was also not comfortable with how expensive it was.
Yeah. That's very interesting. What puzzled me when I came to know it first was that she she was exchanging changing the ancient master symbol to a new master symbol, and I always wondered, why the heck did she do that? Or is it
What,
just
what is it? I don't know what you're referring to by the ancient master symbol.
Well, the chokurei was a master symbol at Usui's and Ayashi's time, and as far as I know, they did not know.
We have evidence for that. I've never heard that before.
Well, I just know that in the, let's say, Japanese Reiki lineages, they don't have a daigomyo.
We don't really know. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Let's say, right? You can't. Do you know what I'm saying? Oh, Walter, I think you froze.
No. Yeah, you froze. Now you're moving again.
Okay, yeah, you froze too. What I was saying is, do you know the expression, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right?
Absolutely.
And the one piece of evidence that we have heard, but I'm a little suspect of it, is Hiroshi Doi claims to have seen these handwritten notes from a student of Usui, but he says, I wasn't allowed to photograph them or something like this, but that in those notes, Usui taught about Daikomyo. Who's to say? I mean, I agree that first of all, this term is a very common term in Japanese. It basically means enlightenment, or great light, great bright light. Was that used in some way by Usui and Hayashi? We don't really. I want to say we don't really know. Was it used in the way that Takada used it? Maybe not. Okay, like that's fair to say. But when you say that the ancient or the Usui era master symbol, I don't think we have any evidence there was, a symbol that's used the same way that Takada used Daikomyo.
As far as my knowledge goes about the Japanese Reiki lineages, they don't use the Daikomyo.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's
Instead of that, they
entirely possible. Yeah, but at the same time, the Japanese Reiki lineages today also underwent changes from Usui's time. It could be that she learned something that she preserved that then died out in Japan. I mean, it's not. I'm not saying it's one thing or the other. I'm just saying it's possible.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and the same way that Takada taught different things to different master students,
Yeah.
right? I mean, Usui. This is kind of Doi's argument, I think, is that Usui may have taught different things to different master students, and when Ushida took over the Usui Gakkai, he changed things a little bit to be what he learned. And when Taketomi took over after Ushida, he may have changed things a little bit, what he learned. And so each generation of leadership, has maybe a little bit different style.
Yes, of
So
course.
it's possible. I mean, yeah, I don't know one way or another. That's all I want to say about in terms of Takada's use of Daikomyo in the 1970s, when she started making masters. Robert Fuston has done some interesting, research on the initiation, the master initiation, which is in his book. I think, some people contest some of that stuff, but I think, he's done really great work on that. I don't know. Did you? I watched your interview with him, but I forget if you guys talked about that.
Oh, we just were talking a little bit about that, but it's in fact a focus of my own research about what exactly is the initiation. So, what are the core elements of it, so to say?
Well, have you talked to Leon Horowitz yet?
Yes, I did. I interviewed him. He's also on my channel.
Well, I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. But you see, I think it's important to have a broader view of that. So for me, it's interesting how is initiation being practiced in Qigong, in the yoga lineages in India, because the basics of initiation are the same. It doesn't matter to which civilization, to which spiritual path you go. They are the same because people are the same. And then I try to make a transfer to Reiki. What is it? What makes an initiation? People talk so much about traditional Reiki, and I try to find out what is a traditional Reiki.
I mean, one of the kind of mantras of academia is, tradition is invented, right, in each generation. And you have certain gatekeepers who say this is traditional and that is not.
Yes.
And it's unsurprisingly, what is traditional is what they're teaching, right? And what is not is what the other people are teaching. So, I mean, I think that happens in Reiki a lot as well.
Yeah. What's fascinating me at the moment, since some years I learned to um, address the symbols of Uzui together with the deities which are related to them, and I
I've
get
seen you write a little about this. I'm really interested to know more about how did you find this? What's the
uh, that's a little bit weird. Most of what I do with Reiki is weird because I remember former lives. And I had enlightenment when I was beginning of the 90s in the Bretagne at Mont Saint-Michel. And from that moment on, I took my memories of former lives more serious. So most what I teach, I remembered from former lives and was putting them into a way to teach them today. And one thing which I saw my first angel when I was 2.5 years old. And since this time, angels are for me, let's say, familiar. And of course, they don't answer every question you have to them, but sometimes they give you some information when they think it's interesting. And they told me to look into the relationship between symbols and deities. So I did. And when I started to develop, let's say, a formal way to address them, then suddenly the symbols had a much wider impact. I could do much more about that than
Wow.
before. For example, I found a way to strengthen someone between 30 to 50% measurable within 10 seconds. And just because I expanded the use of symbols with the deities and many other things. And I
Yeah.
think I'm just at the beginning. So
Well,
what
I think you're really onto something there because so do you know the term kaji kito?
Kaji I know, giving and
Okay,
taking from spiritual.
sorry.
Uh, Kaji I know that is giving and taking from spiritual beings. So
Yeah, well, it's what you're talking about is
yeah,
is
yeah,
connecting with a deity, connecting with a Buddha, a Bodhisattva, a heavenly being, and basically embodying them, right? To receive their powers in a way,
yes,
to connect with them
yes,
and embody them and have them work through you
yes.
is the essence of esoteric Buddhism, right? It's what's someone's called in English like deity yoga,
Ah,
right?
okay, okay.
And so I believe the symbols are very much rooted in that tradition.
Yes.
I completely agree with you. It's
Mhm,
it's interesting you came to that kind of intuitively through
mhm.
revealed knowledge because I think what my path in terms of academic research I think concords with that particular but I was interested though so was it all I saw you talk about Dainichi Nyorai
Yeah,
and you talk about Marishiten
yes.
and then, but there's three symbols. What's you have those two. Did you have a third one as well?
Canon, there is canon.
Of course. Okay, that's I didn't know if that's what. Okay, but I mean, Amida Buddha doesn't have any
Oh,
place.
well, I didn't find a connection to Amida Buddha so far, not a direct one, of course, an indirect
Okay.
one via
I mean,
canon.
I think there are ways where Kanon and Amida are linked, and my own research I think is indicating that the second symbol, the what we call like the mental emotional symbol,
Yeah.
has connections with Amida as well.
Yeah,
So
I guess so. But also to dragons, to the dragon where Canon is riding on, you know.
hmm,
These are the three fires which are in that symbol, which have a relationship to that. What I'm also in is research about the Reiki symbol, the Reiki kanji, of these three mouths, you know, these three squares which are in there.
yeah,
I did some research about something else in Chinese medicine, and there I discovered the three Hun souls, which reside in the liver and
okay,
are eternal in comparison to the Po souls, which start to exist when you start to exist here in a physical plane, and they go sometime after you have made transitions. And then I did some more research, and I found out that there is a concept of higher self, middle self, and inner child, or let's say Uni, Pili, Aumakua, and so on Hawaii. And that they say if these three have the same opinion on something and make a prayer, the prayer comes true. And they use also in Huna the idea of rain coming from above. So that is exactly what the symbol says. And because the people on Hawaii came originally from Asia, I think it's not too far away, not too far stretched, that there might be a connection to these Hun souls and the Reiki symbol.
it's really fascinating. I've never heard anyone put it together like that before. So yeah, the kind of Taoist like inner alchemy stuff with Hawaiian. The one thing about Huna tradition though is that what's his name? The guy who wrote all is it Serge Kalihi King? No,
Yes,
that he came
he did
later.
the NLP version of Huna, but that is not really original.
Yeah, who's the guy? But there's one guy before him
Yeah,
as well.
Kahuna Magic by gosh, what's his name? He was in the beginning of last century in
Yeah,
Hawaii.
anyway, what I want to say, I think both of them also were interested
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Western esotericism,
Mhm.
and were I hesitate to say what Huna teaches is the authentic
No,
Polynesian You know,
Oh,
everything is constantly getting, and even, I mean, look at David Kalakaua, the second to last monarch of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
yeah.
He was a theosophist. He lectured in theosophical societies. He was interested in the lost continent of Mu and Lemuria, and I mean, and he was responsible for what's called, the Hawaiian revival, the Hawaiian cultural revival
Yes.
at the end of the 19th century, where the Christians had banned a lot of stuff, right? The
Mhm.
monarchy had converted to Christianity and
Yeah.
had outlawed hula and had outlawed the traditional medicines,
Hmm.
and Kalakaua revived it. So in its revival 125 years ago, it was already wrapped up in theosophy. It was already wrapped, so I hesitate a little bit to say, okay, and because this person in the early 20th century was saying this is what traditional Polynesian culture is, that
No.
therefore there's this connection thousands of years back with Chinese, the same root of esoteric Taoism, which itself has changed a lot.
Oh,
I
no.
I think that maybe, if there's any connection, it's possible, like with the collective unconscious, or with, trying to access, the hidden truths about human experience and spirit. And I mean, I'm not ruling that out by any means, but yeah, to say there's these kind of epigenetic linkages that go back from the Polynesian migration, I think that's a bit of a harder sell for me,
Well, it
Yeah.
came to start when I was looking into Chinese religion, and there are the so-called Wu shamans.
Yeah.
And the Wu shamans, they have as their personal symbol the Reiki symbol, which they
Mhm.
call Ling Chi, of course.
Mhm.
And then I read more about the Wu shamans that when they wanted to get their specific healing abilities for which they were famous, in springtime they were going on one of the holy mountains in China, and they meditated for some weeks there, doing rituals and doing fasting, and then they came back and having these healing powers,
You
which
have a
made
good
them
book.
famous.
You have a good book you recommend on the Wu?
It's a German book. I can give you the title. I have to look it up in my library. It's
Okay.
not exactly about the Wu shamans. It's about religions in ancient China, and
Mhm.
it's an academic book. It's not an esoteric book,
Okay.
and it gives you more insights about the Wu shamans, which is quite fascinating
No,
because
it's definitely fascinating.
similar what
I Yeah,
Zui did.
and I think there is a common tradition from, Chinese Wu through Korean, like Mu in
Yeah,
Korean,
yeah,
to Japanese, what has become Shinto,
yes,
uh,
yes.
and different forms of mountain religion. Um, there is this continuity and this passage of those types of teachings historically,
Hmm.
through the region, obviously with regional differences as well.
Well,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, I do find that very interesting, that stuff, and the way. I mean, the other thing though, I mean, I'm sorry to be a pain in the ass about this as a historian, but like the way that Usui Sensei understood Reiki in 1920s Japan, it's not obviously not identical to the way that, shamans in, you know early China, early imperial China, or even earlier understood Ling Chi. Like, ideas evolve. The same word has different meanings in different contexts,
Hmm.
and yeah. So they're
That's right. Absolutely. I agree.
yeah,
I
yeah,
just think that there are some working principles
yeah,
which people are look at from different cultural backgrounds. But
yeah.
if you dig deeper and you find the working principle, that's
Mhm.
always very
Yeah,
much the same, you know?
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. And I don't. And he wasn't. Like, I mean, that's the interesting thing for me. I mean, it's not that interesting, but it's a little interesting, I think, is that, in the Hike, in the handbook, the Reiki Ryoho Hike,
Oh.
the book, the
Mm.
Gakkai handbook,
Yeah.
um, in the Q&A section, right? But at the beginning, Usui says, you know, I did not learn this from anybody. I did not study this from anybody. This is a wholly original therapy. No one's ever done anything like this before. And yeah, you see all these kinds of things. So, I mean, but then also in the Takata story, right, which, people have said, oh, it's nonsense, whatever. I mean, there are, I think, seeds in it where she talks about he studied the sutras,
Hmm.
and he studied the sutras in Chinese,
Yeah.
and he didn't get the answer he wanted, so he studied the sutras in Sanskrit, and he found the key, and then he went to Kurama to practice the key and see, does it really work? And I mean, I think, again, I don't think that like Reiki, the system that Usui taught, was exactly
Oh.
taken from one source or from another source, but there certainly are elements of things that he learned from different places that he integrated into the system that he taught. And yeah, I do think Kaji, the symbol use, I do think initiation,
Mm.
um, I do think, for example, the dry bathing, that to me looks very much like Shinto purification stuff on some level. The recitation of the Meiji Emperor poetry to align one's heart,
Yeah.
mind, one's kokoro with the
Yeah.
mind of the emperor. I mean, that itself almost is a kind of kaji, but it's like a you know, imperial worship kaji, right?
Yes.
It's recite this poetry and purify your heart. I mean, it's because of your relationship with the emperor, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean, there's so much interesting stuff going on in Usui's teaching. And then also in I think what you're doing in terms of, okay, this is one wisdom tradition, and there's all these other wisdom traditions, and on some level they're doing similar things.
Oh,
So what can we integrate to, empower? I mean, this is one of the things also that I'm about is Usui only taught for 4 years. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
if he
Incredible.
if he kept going, he may have added more things to the teaching. So,
Yes.
and this idea, we have to stop, this is the way it's done. I mean, there, I think in every generation they've made changes,
Yes.
and and in every generation there are conservative types who say, no, this way that it's done is the right way, and no more, more. So, I again, I think there's danger in unwise changes and in abrupt and hasty changes without understanding what you're
Yeah.
changing. But I
Yeah.
also think there's a danger in excessive formality and slavishness to a form that you don't really understand maybe either, right? I mean, there's the old joke about the lady who is learning how to make a pot roast, and her mother tells her, you cut off the end and both ends, and then you put it in the pan. You know this joke?
Yeah. I know that joke.
Yeah. And, why?
That
Well, I
was.
don't know. That's the way my mother taught me. She calls her grandmother. Oh, yeah, you cut off the end, you cut off the other end, you put it in the pan. Why? Oh, that's how I learned from my older sister. She has why? She says, oh, because the pan I had, it wasn't big enough. It wouldn't fit in the pan, and I had to cut off the two ends. And so yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's yeah. I think what always fascinates me is to find that thin rope where you don't want to get something and where you do not, get into a kind of stasis, not changing something. I always had the experience that in the case where I was very much looking for a solution for something, but not with Reiki or so, and I was relaxed, I got something I did not expect. But when people are trying to get it, I think this tension which is in there prevents us from getting a blessing.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Um, yeah.
So
It's
you did a lot of
they're kind of
research
open.
about these people which lived at Uzui's time and also had a large hand healing movements, right?
Oh yeah. Uh, yeah, I mean there was hand healing movements. I mean, not just hand healing, but yes, and also hand healing. A lot of different healing movements at that time. Uh, and yeah, some like the biggest ones actually I think were more about kind of a little bit what you're talking about kind of opening up to the spirit world and having uh, forces, spiritual forces working through the individual. Those ones were the ones that got the biggest.
Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, there were lots of different hand healing movements at that time too. Yeah.
But was it? is it something they had in common that they were working with Kanon or with uh, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara or the Amida Buddha? So it was about love and about compassion, these kind of things, and about the center, the hara, or was this just one piece of the cake?
The hara is very common.
Hara.
The developing the lower abdomen, developing the belly,
Mhm.
and strengthening the belly is a very, very common thing. The Kanon connection is less common, but I
Mhm.
don't know if you found this, but in the early form of Jode,
Mhm.
he also, Okada Mokichi, had a connection with Kanon.
Oh, much so, yeah. Still today
And
they have.
this idea, Kanon gave him this kind of pearl or this orb, and it went into his belly, I believe.
Yeah.
And I mean, so that there you see that, but I there I don't want to say there weren't there certainly were healing traditions associated with Kanon going back. I mean, to the Lotus Sutra, they talk about this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
um, so but I'm just saying in Usui's time, these kind of like modern hand healing movements, I don't actually know offhand very many other examples where they are drawing on this aspect of kind of esoteric Buddhist healing practice the same way that Usui did.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So it
There,
was
there
especially,
was a form. There's one interesting one
yeah.
where it was a form almost of like chiropractic
Ah.
with manipulations that was tied to Amida. It was made by a Pure Land priest
Hmm.
who got interested in kind of vital force
Hmm.
and kind of developed his own form of like osteopathic manipulation or chiropractic manipulation that he said was to allow Amida's love basically to enter the body. That
Yeah.
physiological problems prevented one from really connecting with Amida properly.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of reflex zone thing.
Sorry.
So it seems to be a kind of reflex zone thing.
Reflexon.
Yeah, that uh, when they relate massage to opening up to the spiritual, then they might use reflex zones to align energies or so in the body.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what reflexon.
A reflex zone, like in the hand, that there is a
Oh.
reflex zone for the heart, reflex zone
Oh.
for
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. The points.
yeah.
I'm not sure how much I've just read a little bit about this guy. I'm not sure how much they used the points or whether I think it was about spinal alignment. I think it was closer to chiropractic. But yeah,
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure about that. But I've just read a little bit about this guy, and it seems very interesting. Yeah, but it came to mind because it was an example of kind of a combination of these types of practices, right? Where, of course, hand healing was big in the US at this time, too. The mesmeric healing, the magnetic healing. This is one of the things that I mentioned in my dissertation,
Hmm.
uh, but, there's, I think, more work to be done on it. These translations of books that were written originally in English into Japanese were part of what informed Usui and his contemporaries.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, you didn't read about what I wrote about Ramacharaka? So there was this guy in Chicago in the 19. I mean, he starts writing, I guess, in the 1890s, but really in the first decades of the 20th century, he gets very, very prolific.
Hmm.
Um, his name is William Walker Atkinson.
Yes, of
Uh,
course. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah, and so he writes the Kabbalion. I actually don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a very important kind of esoteric text of the time. And he writes a lot of new thought, right? How to use the power of your mind to change reality. But he writes a series of books under the pseudonym Yogi Ramacharaka
Ah,
that are
yeah.
about the science of breath,
Hmm.
right? Pranayama,
Hmm.
and he has one about the psychic healing, the science of psychic healing, where he talks about, I mean, you read this stuff. I had a friend of mine who I turned on to this book, and he said, it's like I'm reading about Reiki. I mean, there's so many parallels.
Yeah.
And this book got translated into Japanese in 1916 and was a very popular book, it seems like, at the time. Um, a lot of Japanese authors in this kind of subculture reference it. And
Okay.
so there's a lot in there that could easily have influenced Usui as well. Or if not directly, maybe influenced other therapists, and then Usui learned about those other therapists. But somehow, Ramacharaka seems to be an important source of information, or William Walker Atkinson. And he himself was combining things from the mesmeric healing movement,
Yeah.
things from yoga,
Yeah.
things from New Thought,
Mm-hmm.
into what he called pranic healing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, 20 years or so before Usui starts teaching, 15, 20 years or so before Usui starts teaching, and then comes over to Japan and gets translated into Japanese. And one of the things they use to translate prana into Japanese is the term Reiki.
Ah, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very interesting, kind of all of the different conflux of influences, from traditional Japanese religion, which itself comes from Korea and China and India, Silk Road in India. And then some of this like new psychic healing kind of stuff, which is coming from America. And some of that's coming from India, and some of it's coming from Europe, and some of it's homegrown American, innovations. And Usui lived at this time where he was combining all of these different influences into a wholly original practice that I never studied with anyone before, and yeah. So, and this is our legacy.
So it's possible that he also was familiar with mesmeric hand healing. Uh,
Yeah, and maybe indirectly, maybe.
yeah, yeah, indirectly. I've
But in hypnotism too, hypnotherapy was very big
oh,
in
really?
Japan. Yeah, the first decade of the 20th century, from about 1903 to 1908 or so, there was this period that retrospectively has been called like the hypnotism boom in Japan, where this was, I mean, in all the newspapers they're talking about it. Scientists are doing experiments on it. I mean, it was very a lot of public interest
Mhm.
in this. And so, Usui Sensei would have been in his 40s at this time. He would have been very, aware of all this talk about hypnotism and the power of the mind, and a lot of stuff about hypnotherapy, about, how can you use the mind to heal the body, which we see in Reiki, right? Which
Yes, of course.
yeah, he says that in the intro again to the Q&A, that when the mind is healthy, the body will naturally become healthy.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. I wondered. Uh, Uzui was a Qigong master. He was in a yearbook about 1910 or 1912 as a very famous Qigong master in Japan.
I've seen people reference this. I've never seen the actual source.
I've seen the book with someone, but I couldn't get my hand on it, unfortunately.
Okay. If you have any information about that, because I've seen a lot of people, William Rand, like references this a lot.
Yeah,
I've never seen the actual source for that. So I'd
yeah.
be very interested.
I've seen the page with a picture of Uzui on it, and some Japanese I couldn't read, but the beginning of the whole thing was a Qigong yearbook.
Okay. And where, if you're able to say, where did you see this? Who has this book?
It was a someone who got this from Japan, but I think that he traded it for something. So I did not meet this person again. It was an acquaintance.
Are you sure it's not the article from the 1980s from the Twilight Zone magazine?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
It was purely Japanese.
Well, that's purely Japanese.
Yeah.
That's written in Japanese in 1980s.
Okay, I don't
1980s.
know. It looked very old, so it did not look like a.
Okay. I if you have any more information about that,
I
I
will
think
pass it
that's
on to you. Yeah.
an important source. Yeah. I've never seen anything about Usui Sensei published before 1922. Which is it's supposed to be the year for the handbook.
That's I found this interesting because I also traveled Hong Kong because through the martial arts I did since the age of 8, I had some, let's say, over some corners, some relation to people doing Qigong since long time in Hong Kong.
Mm,
And I asked them about Ling Chi because I wondered what they were doing in China with it. And they said, well, we know about that, but we do this only in the higher levels of Qigong because you need some time to build it up. And we understand it as a quartermaster for the Shin Ki, for the divine key. So if you have more Reiki, then the probability will grow that the divine key will be with you.
mhm,
And that I found very interesting. I thought, wow, that's interesting because people usually say, well, Reiki is divine, but what I experience myself is when you treat yourself for a longer time, then your heart is expanding, that you in a way love the client. And I thought, wow, that is something which invites the divine.
mm.
So
Yeah, I heard Renee Vogli said something very beautiful about that. He said about how, sometimes a client will walk in and he'll, not really feel like, oh, this person, like blah, blah, blah. But he said during the treatment, he's like, I fall in love with every single
yes,
person I treat.
yes,
That is where
yes.
the power of the treatment comes from, is this love working
Mhm.
through me. And yeah, and I think, like you say, coming, it's not coming from within you. It's like this feeling of a divine love, that you receive,
Yeah,
because it's more perfect than a human love, or something like that.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I wonder whether this might be the reason for the uh, bottom part of the Honcha de Shunen with the Kokoro symbol, because it seems to me a very, very fundamental thing with the
I mean,
Kokoro.
that's part of the symbol for Nen, right? For mind, or
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nen.
It's
Yeah.
part of the Nen symbol, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, yeah, you do enough etymology on, the characters, of course. Yeah, there's a relationship there for
mm,
sure.
mm.
Shonen. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole book to be written of what is shonen. I mean, yeah.
I think to a certain degree we can do research and some other things are open, well, maybe to our experience, but I don't think that we can really rationalize about that. I don't
Right,
know.
right. No, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, there's this whole kind of push right now that it's all about non-duality,
Uh,
and so if it's about non-duality, that's beyond words. I mean, what can you say once you get beyond the level of the.
that might be interesting because some years ago I was doing more research about the symbols. So not exactly about what one symbol is doing, but what are these symbols doing when I do Reiki? Because some people think that they bring in another energy, but I never had the experience that there is, let's say, other principles at work when I put in a symbol. So now I understood after a while that Reiki is not to be found in the yin or yang part of the yin yang symbol, but everywhere where yin and yang were meeting. So that
Mm,
the symbols are helping very specifically, very focused to change yin to yang and yang to yin. And this makes the specific value because they all have their pattern of how to make that yin yang change. And it's not that they bring in other energy, they work like a lens, like a transistor for Reiki.
Walter, that's the second time you've said something that's really, like, I feel like you intuit through this non-rational way that I think also reflects something from my research, that
Oh,
in the Tomita Kaiji book that we're translating right now. Do you know about this translation project that Reiki Centers of America? Okay, Tomita Kaiji was one of,
no.
he was a student of Usui Reiki Ryoho Gakkai, who wrote a book in 1933, and he kind of started his own style,
Mhm.
but obviously some of the things that he are teaching is things that he learned from the Gakkai,
Yeah.
and but and also his own kind of building on that, and his own,
Mhm.
and uh, the section where he talks about Usui Sensei is very short, but one of the only things he says about Usui is that his teaching about Reiki is about the transformation of yin and yang, and it's a very specific phrase. I think it's inyo oyo or something like that. That I had to look it up. It's like a technical term. It's not a common expression, and it's something they talk about in Chinese medicine, where it's literally about what you just said. It's about the transformation of yin into yang and yang into yin. And this is what he says. This was Usui Sensei's teaching about Reiki was inyo oyo or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that you're really onto something there. I think that one of the few sources we have from pre-war Japan is that the Usui Reiki Hogakai talked about this. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That is great to know. I've never thought about that. I always was wondering whether there's a source about that, but well, now you told it.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally it's 4 characters, but it's like 4 characters in a very crucial juncture of this book.
Yeah.
It's like the one. I think there's literally maybe 2 sentences about Usui Sensei in the book, and that's in one of them. And that's like and it kind of says it's like the essence of his teaching or something. So
Okay.
yeah.
But this refers to the hara because the hara is in between yin and yang. And I've read in the Uzui handbook that Uzui did some hara work.
Yeah, yeah. The
I never heard
hara.
about that in Takada's Reiki.
I mean, she talked about it in her classes.
Okay.
She didn't always explicitly talk about it. Takada was an interesting individual, right? So she's not Japanese. She's local Japanese from Hawaii. But I think she really wanted to do right by her teacher.
Yeah.
And in her story, she tells about how she was scolded in Japan for asking too many questions.
I can imagine that.
You learn it from your teacher, and you do it the way your teacher says, and you don't need to know all this stuff. You just do it. And maybe over time, your teacher will tell you more and more, but in the beginning, just do it like this and stop asking so many questions. And so I think she internalized that, because I think she was a very curious person in her own way, but she internalized this kind of stern, no nonsense way of teaching a bit from her experience studying in Japan, I think.
Yeah.
This is my own kind of theory. So there's a tape of her teaching, I believe, at the Trinity Metaphysical Center in Redwood City around 1976 or so. It's quoted in Robert Fuston's book.
Yeah.
And apparently in his next book, he is going to talk more about this. So I'm very excited about that. I'm not sure if it's going to be in volume 2 or volume 3. And I've been waiting for, ever since volume 1 came out, I'm like, come on, man, where's the next?
Yeah. Right.
And I know people are impatient about my book too, so maybe I should have more compassion with Robert and Olaf and everyone else. But so in this tape, a student asks her, kind of about, okay, how does this all work? Like, what's happening here? Like, where does the energy come from? How does it come into your body? And she keeps basically saying, like, don't worry about it, just do it. And they say, but like, how does it work? Like, how does it work? How does it come into you? How do you get the energy? And she's like, okay, listen, you want to know? You've got an antenna that comes out of the top of your head. And the Reiki comes into the antenna. And, and when I give you the initiation, basically, I'm raising your antenna. Mm-hmm. And the Reiki comes into your antenna and it charges your battery. And your battery is at the bottom of your stomach. Mm-hmm. And when your battery is charged, that's what allows you to have the Reiki come out of your hands. Mm-hmm. And another thing she said was that if you haven't done Reiki for a long time, a student was worried, what happens? Do you lose your Reiki? She said, well, if you haven't practiced in a long time, the best thing to do is to treat, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Treat your abdomen, and that will recharge your battery, and then you can do Reiki again. So I mean, it lived on in her. She did teach it to students. She did talk about it with students, but I think it got de-emphasized in the next generation. It kind of like, it wasn't that she stopped teaching it. It's that particularly, and I think certain lineages, I think John Harvey Gray's lineage knows this stuff more
Oh,
in some level and talks about this stuff more.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I mean, also with what's called the Joshin Kokyu, right? The belly breathing that kind of purifies your heart mind, right?
mhm.
The She taught this too. I mean, and I think Brian Brunius of the Reiki Centers of America, I think he has a tape of her. I'm not sure if he has a tape or if he just has he has kind of a photographic memory. And he told me, I have his telling of John teaching him, he was a master student of John Harvey Gregg, teaching him this meditation practice. And this is, before Frank Petter starts publishing, the Japanese Reiki techniques and stuff, that he knew this technique about, you breathe, it comes down through your crown, it goes down to what I think John called your sacral chakra, because John was into yoga and chakras and stuff. But, he says it goes down to, below your navel,
Mhm.
and you bring the energy in there, and then you expand it out. And, this practice of strengthening your lower abdomen is something Takata taught, at least, in the Bay Area. Even if I should ask, there's not a lot of people left, but Rick Bachner and Paul Mitchell and maybe Gretchen Muncie and other people. Do you remember her talking about this meditation?
Mhm.
But as I understand, I think it was something she taught in the first degree.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's another thing which is fascinating for me. I always had the impression that your personal state has an influence on how much Reiki you are able to provide. And I wondered how is this possible if we get the Reiki in and just pass it on. And
yeah.
then after doing some Qigong research, I came to the idea that the Rei is what we receive, and the Qi comes from our own abdomen. So we have the Rei in plenty, but not the Qi, and this is why Usui taught this hara strengthening exercises. And I found out myself. I do a lot of treatment when my hara is strong, when I'm really big energy in the hara, healing goes very fast. And it is strengthened the more I do Reiki,
Mhm.
especially when I start in the morning. It's less than in the evening. I don't know whether there is something in your research which gives some light on that.
I don't personally have a good source for that, but Inamoto Hyakuten, right, from Komyo Reiki.
Just by name.
Okay, he teaches something very similar to that,
Ah,
where
okay.
he is very much about um, like the Rei is the power of the heaven,
Yes.
ten Rei,
Mhm.
and Ki is the power of the earth, the Chi,
Right. Yeah.
and that humans are between heaven and earth, right, and that it's in us that the Rei and the Ki kind of meet,
Yeah. Yeah.
and from above and from below.
Yeah.
And I think there's something what you're saying that it's very close there.
That's so
Um,
familiar.
Now I don't think he has necessarily a like historical source for that. I think it's more his kind of study of various teachings and kind of
Mhm.
his own experiences with Reiki, like you
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Yeah.
where this is I think a central teaching in Komyo.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Oh, Justin, this is such an interesting talk with you.
Yeah, no, I'm really, yeah. I mean, as I said, I've looked at some of your stuff before, but I wasn't, and I've watched some of your conversations before. But I think in this conversation, for the first time, I'm really sensing how much you intuit what other in ways things that other sources I think kind of confirm
Mm.
that you weren't really aware of. So I think that's really a testament to that you're onto a lot of things here, Walter. It's definitely a pleasure to connect with you in this way. Yeah.
Yeah, same here, and I would be happy if we can go on with this conversation sometime if you like.
Yeah,
Because
maybe a part two. Yeah, unfortunately, as I told you via email, I've got so many things going on right
yeah,
now. I start teaching like classes again at the university in a couple of weeks, and I'm trying to finish some writing as well, because once classes start, it's over until December. I can't get anything else done, and
yeah,
yeah, I'm a new professor at this university, or it's not professor, they call it instructor, but
Oh,
so
wow.
all these courses I'm teaching are new to me and I'm learning so much. I mean, it's like going to grad school all over again, but it's very hard to balance getting writing done and being a good teacher. And but one good thing though is this term I'm teaching a course on health and healing in East Asia, and so I'm reading a lot about Chinese medicine and that history. So I think that'll be beneficial for me. I'm teaching a course on folklore in China, and so I'll be learning a lot more about different kinds of ghost stories and monsters and all kinds of things that I'm interested in. So I mean, I think in the long run, it's very good for my grounding. These things that I studied, and also one about business in Japan. I'm teaching a course on business in Japan, which again, for thinking about things about maybe ideas about money and ideas about professionalism, and so I think in the long run, all these things that I've studied a little bit here and there, I'm actually gaining more expertise in, but it's very time consuming. And yeah, but I would love to continue a part two, who knows, in a few months or something.
Yes, of course. Whenever you have time,
Great.
Thank you so much, Justin, for your time and your effort and your
Thank you.
research. I'm a fan of you.
Thank you. Yeah. And if anyone wants to read more of my stuff, I have a lot available for free online. The website is Justin Stein. You can probably see the name in the YouTube thing below. Maybe I can give you some links, and you can put the links
Yes,
in
I
the
put
YouTube.
them just under our interview.
Great. And then I also have a Facebook thing where I'm sharing some of my research
Yes.
whenever I have time.
Yeah,
I try to jot a little thing here and there, but with some details that aren't anywhere else. So
I see. Just write an email to me what you like to have mentioned in in the footnote, of our interview, and it will be there.
great. Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you, Justin. Have a wonderful time. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.